One backpack, one dog, one child no one was looking for. On a scorching summer afternoon in Claridge Base, while drills thundered and orders echoed, a retired K-9 named Duke refused to stay silent. His ears twitched. His nose caught something no radar could fear hidden in a faded canvas bag. And beside him, Logan Hayes, a soldier with too many ghosts, took a step off the path. What they found wasn't just a message. It was a cry for help. A girl lost. A mother imprisoned. A truth buried in cement and silence. This is the story of how a broken man, a forgotten dog, and a brave child brought down something much bigger than themselves: corruption. And in doing so, found each other. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell for more stories that speak where the world has gone quiet. The summer heat at Claridge Base was not just oppressive, it was predatory. It clung to the asphalt like a second skin, seeped into boots, uniforms, and bones, and turned every breath into a slow boil. By midday, the training yard had fallen silent. Even the wind refused to move, as if afraid of disturbing the baked dust settled on the edges of concrete paths. Sergeant Logan Hayes trudged along the fence perimeter, with sweat beading on the back of his neck. His khaki shirt unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled high up his sun-darkened arms. He was in his early 30s, tall with an athletic build, once honed by combat, and now sharpened by restlessness. There were lines around his eyes, not from age, but from too many mornings spent waiting for something to change and never knowing what. He walked with the measured pace of a man who used to lead now, assigned to logistics and routine checks, a quiet exile handed to soldiers who had seen too much, but hadn't broken quite enough to be discharged. Logan didn't talk much anymore. The jokes had dried up the day his partner Corporal Jace Fletcher and K-9 Odin, his first working dog, were killed in Kandahar during an ambush. He hadn't seen it coming, and that haunted him more than the blood. Now he was paired with Duke, a 6-year-old German shepherd, pulled from a decommissioned K-9 unit in Nevada. Duke had the build of a wolf and the soul of a soldier. He moved like smoke, quiet, watchful, and always 10 paces ahead. His coat was a deep sable, his snout dusted with flecks of gray, and his amber eyes held the kind of stillness that only came from betrayal. Logan didn't trust Duke, not because the dog had done anything wrong, but because he was afraid to believe again. The base's outer path ran parallel to the firing range wall, curving behind the overgrown barracks, and heading toward the chain-link fence separating Claridge from the civilian road. It was there, beneath a rusted light pole, that Duke stopped dead in his tracks. Logan paused. What is it? Duke's ears pricked forward. He took 2 cautious steps toward the edge of the grass, nose twitching, tail stiff. Then he let out a single sharp bark, not warning, but alarm. It startled Logan. Duke rarely barked. Easy. Logan muttered, his hand drifting near his belt. Show me. Duke nosed his way into a patch of wildbrush, hugging the base of the fence, then stopped beside a faded purple backpack, lying half buried in dried grass and dirt. It looked like it had been there for days. Weathered sun bleached the straps frayed. Logan crouched, sweat trickling down his temple. He hesitated, then reached out and gently pulled it free. The weight surprised him. It was heavier than it looked, not like a school bag filled with snacks and stickers. It sagged in the center like it held something dense, deliberate. He unzipped the top flap. Inside there was no lunchbox, no coloring books, no name tag or emergency contact card. Instead, there was a crumpled sheet of wide-ruled paper, stained at the edges and folded neatly in half. On it, written in a child's uneven, slightly slanted handwriting, "My mom doesn't talk anymore. She sleeps with her eyes open. If you're reading this, please don't tell him." Below the writing was a colored pencil drawing, a woman lying sideways on the floor, her arms flat at her side. Her hair spilled out in long red strokes. A man stood beside her, towering, faceless, holding something dark and blocky in his hand, a frying pan. There was no blood, but the edges of the woman's body were surrounded in rough red pencil, as if the child didn't know how else to show danger. Logan stared at the image, heart hammering in his chest. The paper trembled slightly in his hand, not from wind, but from something colder than heat dread. He looked over at Duke. The dog sat completely still, eyes locked on the backpack, ears pulled back. "What the hell is this?" Logan whispered. He checked the bag again. Tucked inside the side pocket was a plastic Ziploc bag, and inside it, a piece of pale fabric stained with what looked like dried rust-brown smears. No odor, but unmistakable in its message. Evidence. He stood up slowly. Around him, the heat of the afternoon buzzed like static. There was no one on the path, no one watching. Duke let out a low growl, staring into the distance toward the tree line beyond the fence. "Did you smell her?" Logan asked under his breath. "Is she out there?" Duke didn't move, but Logan felt the answer in the tension of the leash. For a long moment, Logan just stood there, letting the weight of the sun press down on him. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a toy someone lost on the way to daycare. It was a signal, a whisper that only a dog had heard. A minute later, Logan and Duke walked back toward the command barracks. Logan didn't put the backpack into evidence. He didn't hand it off to the junior duty officer. He carried it himself. Because something in his gut, the same gut that once told him to duck before the IED exploded, that once told him to run when others froze, was now telling him someone was alive and waiting. And Duke, with his nose to the ground, was already leading the way. As they turned the corner, Logan looked down at the dog beside him, and for the first time spoke not like a handler to his asset, but like a man speaking to another soul. "You're not wrong about this, are you?" Duke looked up. His tail gave a single silent twitch. And Logan, who hadn't followed anyone since the day he stopped believing in orders, followed Duke. Into heat. Into silence. And maybe into something that would demand everything he had left. The morning air clung thick to the skin, already hot before the sun had reached its peak. Claridge Base shimmered under the weight of another blistering day, its concrete walkways pulsing with heat. Sergeant Logan Hayes stepped out of the barracks with the purple backpack slung over one shoulder, and Duke walking quietly at his side. The German shepherd had barely slept. His eyes, sharp and restless, had been fixed on the doorway since dawn, waiting. Not barking. Just waiting. Logan hadn't turned the bag in. He couldn't explain why, but every instinct told him it wasn't a coincidence. That someone had trusted the dog more than they trusted any adult. That someone had placed that backpack like a message in a bottle, deliberate, desperate, precise. Duke tugged gently on the leash the moment they crossed the main motor pool. Logan didn't need convincing. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see where your nose takes us." Instead of circling the perimeter like usual, Duke led Logan down a narrow gravel path that veered off the main logistics road, unused, overgrown. At the end of it stood a weather-worn metal gate, half unlatched. Beyond that, hidden behind a curtain of tangled trees and rusted fencing, sat a string of small one-story buildings with sagging roofs and flaking paint. This was the Veterans Block Echo Row. Logan had only been here once years ago to deliver supplies to an older vet with a fused knee and a habit of sleeping with a revolver under his pillow. The place had always felt like the far end of something. Like the base didn't quite know what to do with these men, so they were tucked into a quiet corner and left alone. Duke stopped in front of House 28. It was a squat box of a home walls, once white, now stained with mildew and heat. An overturned lawn chair rested by the porch. A busted swamp cooler sat humming against the window, groaning with every revolution. Duke's posture stiffened ears, forward tail, still muscles taut. "Got something?" Logan asked softly. Duke sniffed the base of the door, then moved to the side window nose, twitching at the cracks between the wooden slats. Then, without warning, he sat perfectly still, waiting again. Logan knocked. The door opened seconds later. A man in his late 40s filled the frame, lean, a bit taller than Logan, with short, unkempt hair that had started graying at the temples. His face was narrow and sun-worn jaw, square eyes, a pale steel blue that flicked from Logan to Duke in a glance. There was something rigid about the way he held the door, like someone used to standing guard, but his tank top clung to him with sweat, and his cargo shorts were frayed at the hems. "Something wrong?" he asked, voice flat. "Sergeant Logan Hayes." Logan introduced, holding up his base credentials without stepping forward. "Just following up on a tracking anomaly near this sector. K9 alerted yesterday. Could be nothing. Mind if we do a quick walkthrough?" The man hesitated. "This is civilian quarters. You're still under base jurisdiction," Logan replied calmly. "Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes." The man's eyes flicked toward Duke again. "That dog smells something dogs don't guess," Logan said. "They respond." After a pause, the man stepped aside. "I'm Lucas. Been here since 2020, alone. No problems, no complaints, just me and the walls. Inside the house was clean but empty. The furniture was sparse military issue cot, folding table, no decorations, no photos on the walls. A small television sat blank on the counter. The air was thick with the musty scent of closed spaces, damp cloth, and something faintly metallic beneath it all. Duke moved silently through the space nose close to the floorboards. He stopped near the far end of the hallway beside a closed wooden door. His body went rigid again. "What's back there?" Logan asked casually. "Basement," Lucas said without emotion. "Tool room, storage, nothing worth seeing." "Mind if I take a peek?" Lucas didn't answer right away. Then he let out a small breath and shook his head. "I'd rather you didn't. AC's busted. It's like a furnace down there. And I've got gear spread out. Dangerous if you don't know your footing." Duke scratched at the door, just once. Logan took one step forward before stopping. He noticed something odd, a faint square imprint on the hallway rug, like something beneath had been moved recently and replaced. He let it go for now. Duke didn't. When they stepped outside a minute later, the heat was even heavier. Logan paused at the porch, glancing back over his shoulder. Lucas stood in the doorway, arms folded, gaze unreadable. "Have a good day," Lucas said. "Hope your dog finds what he's looking for." Logan nodded, said nothing, and walked away. Back at the station, Logan spread the contents of the purple backpack across his desk again. The drawing, the note, the stained cloth, and now, the face of the man who had insisted too quickly that he was alone. Duke lay beside the desk, ears alert but unmoving. "You saw something?" Logan said, voice low. "And I think I did too." He looked at the child's drawing once more, the sketch of the trapdoor, the X in red pencil, a warning or a direction. He picked up the paper and folded it carefully. Then he reached down and rested his hand on Duke's shoulder. "All right, partner," he whispered. "Let's see what else they didn't want us to find." The air was heavy that night, thick with the kind of stillness that preceded a storm, though no clouds crossed the moon. Claridge Base, even in sleep, hummed faintly with the sounds of distant generators and creaking metal. Most of the base was dark. A few barracks still glowed with security lights, but the outer fields, particularly the abandoned training range, were steeped in shadows. Logan Hayes lay half awake in his bunk, the ceiling fan rotating overhead with an uneven click. Something pulled at the edge of his thoughts. He wasn't sure why he couldn't sleep, but part of him had been restless since they left House 28 earlier that day. Duke had remained strangely agitated since the visit, whining softly at the door of his crate, pacing with that silent, purposeful rhythm only working dogs knew. At 17, Logan heard it, the sharp clink of metal on metal. The crate latch had been nudged loose. Logan swung his legs off the bunk and grabbed his boots without turning on the light. By the time he reached the hallway, Duke was already gone. Outside, the air was warmer than it should have been. Logan moved with trained steps, quiet, controlled alert, his eyes adjusting fast to the silvery light. He followed the path past the outer fence and toward the edge of the old training field. It was a place rarely used now, its targets rusted and bleached by years of exposure. A soft sound echoed ahead. Not a bark, not a cry. Footsteps bare, hesitant against gravel. Then came a voice. Duke. It was small, young, female. Logan stopped in place. From behind the old range tower emerged a figure, a girl no older than 7, with tangled dark hair that fell in strings across her thin shoulders. She wore a torn t-shirt 2 sizes too big, and denim shorts faded nearly white with wear. Her knees were scraped, her arms covered in faint smudges of dirt and bruises. Her face was pale beneath the moonlight, but her eyes, wide and hollow with exhaustion, were fixed on Duke, who sat in the field waiting for her. She didn't run. She walked slow, deliberate, like someone who had learned that running only made things worse. Duke didn't move, but his tail gave one low, quiet thump. The girl reached him, knelt beside him, and buried her face in his neck. Not crying, just holding. Logan approached with caution, careful not to startle her. "Hey," he said softly. "You all right?" She turned her face just enough to see him, but didn't speak. Her expression was blank, but not unfamiliar. He'd seen that look before on refugees, hostages, children evacuated from collapsed cities. A face that had run out of ways to ask for help. "What's your name?" Logan asked, lowering his voice as he crouched. "I don't know if I should tell you," she said quietly. "You might tell him." "Who's him?" Her gaze dropped to Duke. He doesn't tell. That's why I came. Logan exhaled slowly. I won't tell either, I promise. After a long pause, she whispered, Emily. Okay, Emily, Logan said, steadying his voice. How do you know, Duke, I saw him? She said. The day I left the backpack, he was with you. He looked at it before you did. You left that for us. She nodded a tiny movement. I didn't know what else to do, she continued. I couldn't go to the police. They might send me back. I waited until he came close. He's smart. He finds things. Logan noticed her hands trembling. Where's your mom? Emily swallowed. She's still in the floor. Under it. The door's heavy and I'm not strong enough. You mean, in the house? At number 28. Her eyes flicked to his. Don't say the number. Don't say the street. Someone might hear. It was then Logan noticed the small object hanging from a shoelace around her neck, a broken silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. There was something carved into it, but it had been worn smooth by time or fingers. She's alive, Emily whispered. But she doesn't have much time. Logan glanced around. The field was deserted. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Did he hurt you? She looked away. He gets angry when I leave. That's why I hide when I come here. Emily, Logan said, carefully placing a hand near hers, but not touching. Can you tell me what's under that floor? Is it locked? She nodded. Where's the key? Her fingers tightened around the pendant. I don't have it, but sometimes he forgets to latch it. He drinks. When he drinks, he forgets. Duke moved closer, laying his head on her lap. She relaxed slightly, her fingers threading through the fur behind his ears. I don't know what adults to trust, she said, but Duke came back. That's all I needed. Logan felt a twist in his chest. He remembered another war zone, another child, one who hadn't made it out. You did the right thing, he said softly. You were brave, and I'm going to help you. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to believe him, but didn't quite know how. I'll need you to show me the back way, he said. When he's not home, when it's safe, she nodded again. I'll leave you a sign when it's time, she said. But if he knows I've talked to you, he'll move her. Then no one will find her. Logan stood offering a hand. She didn't take it. Instead, she stood on her own, brushing her hair back behind her ears. I have to go, she said. He counts things. If they're moved, he knows. Will you be okay getting back? I always am. She turned and walked back into the darkness, not looking back. Logan didn't stop her. Duke stood at his side again, watching her go, until she vanished past the perimeter shrubs. They walked back in silence, the gravel crunching softly beneath their feet. When they reached Logan's quarters, he sat on the edge of the bunk and stared at the pendant she'd worn in his mind. He didn't know what it meant. But he knew what mattered. She had come not because she trusted men or soldiers or uniforms. She came because she trusted Duke. And now Logan had to live up to that. Claridge simmered under the punishing summer sun. The pavement radiated heat, distorting the air like waves off a stove. Logan Hayes moved with quiet urgency along the edge of the southern perimeter, his steps light, his jaw clenched. Beside him, Duke, 6 years old, powerful and perceptive, moved with purpose, his nose, low tail, rigid, catching scents the human eye could never trace. They were heading toward Echo Row again. Officially, Logan had no reason to be there. Unofficially, he couldn't ignore the child's whisper. She's still in the floor, under it. Emily's voice had been faint, but it echoed louder than any order. And Duke, so often still, so often silent, had reacted like lightning when she spoke. Something had shifted, a connection made. Now they were back at House 28. The air was dense around it, not just heat, something heavier, the kind of heat that carried silence too thick to breathe. Duke circled the side of the house, pausing at the basement vent. His head snapped toward the lower wall. He growled low in his throat, short, deliberate. Logan stepped to the side door. It was locked, but barely. He drew a thin, curved tool from his boot and picked it open with a flick of his wrist. He didn't feel like a soldier anymore. Not exactly. He felt like something between a detective and a trespasser. Inside, the heat was worse. The windows had all been sealed shut. A musty, suffocating air filled the house. Logan moved carefully through the bare room, his eyes scanning for signs of life movement, anything. Duke stayed close, but kept glancing toward the hallway. They reached the basement door. Same frame, same added latch. Duke froze, then let out a bark not loud, but sharp and focused. Logan pressed his hand to the wood. It was hot, much hotter than it should have been for an interior door. He whispered, "You smell something, don't you, boy?" Duke whined and scratched once at the door. Logan reached for the latch, but then footsteps. Sergeant Hayes. The voice behind him stopped him cold. It was low, firm, and not unfamiliar. He turned. Major Thomas Kincaid stood at the end of the hallway. Mid-50s, lean and tall, with silver hair cropped military tight and eyes that had once commanded whole battalions. His uniform was as pressed as ever, his tone clipped and unforgiving. "What are you doing here?" Kincaid asked, arms folded. "Following a lead," Logan replied. "From the girl." Kincaid's eyes moved to the dog. "You're letting a child and a dog send you into unauthorized housing. There may be someone trapped in the basement. You have evidence, I have Duke. And I have instinct." "That's not good enough," Kincaid snapped. "We've been through this, Hayes. You want to open that door, you do it with clearance. You do it with process. Not on a hunch, and not again." The last word stung again. 3 years ago, Marcus and his K9 banner were left behind because Logan had obeyed the retreat order. Kincaid had given it. Marcus hadn't made it. Neither had Banner. Logan's voice was tight. "You think I'm doing this to prove something? I think you're dangerously close to disobeying direct protocol." "Again," Duke growled, short, intense. Kincaid didn't flinch. "You want to do something about this? Go get the paperwork. File a request. Don't make this another mistake." Logan looked down at the dog, then at the door, then back at the man who once ordered him to stand down while his best friend died. "You always said orders mattered more than instinct," Logan said. "But sometimes instinct is the only thing that saves lives. Not if it costs your badge," Kincaid replied. "Or another life." Logan stepped back, his fists clenched, the heat pressed in like an invisible hand smothering every breath. He wouldn't force the door. Not today, not in front of Kincaid. Not without backup. But he would be back. "I'll file it," Logan said at last. Kincaid gave a nod, stern, unreadable, and stepped aside. Logan exited the house with Duke at his side, the dog glancing back once at the basement door, then pressing against Logan's leg like a silent oath. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the haze that hung low over Claridge, casting the base in a muted gold. Logan sat behind the wheel of his truck, parked half a block from Echo Row. Duke sat in the passenger seat, ears perked, eyes trained on House 28. His focus was unwavering. At 08:14 the door opened. Lucas Brandt stepped out wearing his usual nondescript flannel and faded jeans, moving like a man with nowhere to be but everywhere to hide. He was wiry, pale-skinned, with thinning brown hair that clung to his temples. His posture was tense, like every motion was borrowed time. A plastic bag hung from his hand, coffee maybe, or groceries. He didn't glance around, didn't lock the door. He just walked toward the east exit of the base, disappearing behind a row of dying maple trees. "Showtime," Logan muttered. Duke leapt down First Landing with a soft thud. Logan followed, eyes darting up and down the silent street. Then they crossed. The house greeted them with stillness too still. Logan didn't bother picking the lock this time. He had a copy, slipped from the housing office with a favor and a memory that still made his stomach twist. The door creaked open, and the heat inside hit harder than ever. The house reeked of rot and something metallic beneath it. Duke moved without hesitation, gliding down the hall like a shadow. They stopped at the basement door. Duke gave a low growl. Logan unlocked it. The smell hit him first, stale, thick, and damp. It clung to his nostrils and coated his tongue. The stairs groaned under their weight as they descended into darkness. Halfway down, Logan flicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed a narrow, windowless concrete room, a metal work table, old tools rusted along the wall, and in the far corner, a woman. She was slumped against the wall, wrists bound behind her ankles tied. Her clothes hung from her like wet fabric, sweat-stained, torn at the sleeves. Her long, dark hair was plastered to her face, cheeks, hollow lips, cracked. She looked maybe mid-30s tall, even while seated with a frame that once held strength, now withered from confinement. Her eyes opened slowly, deep green dulled by exhaustion, but not yet emptied. She didn't scream. She flinched until she saw Duke. He moved first, crawled toward her without barking, without a sound, his ears tucked back, head lowered in submission. He lay beside her, gently resting his head near her knees like a soldier finally reporting in. Sarah, Logan said, stepping closer. Her throat moved, but no words came. Logan knelt and gently untied her hands, wincing as he saw the red raw skin beneath the rope. She finally whispered, "Emily." "She's safe," Logan said quickly. "She came to find help." Duke led her to me. Sarah exhaled half a sob, half a prayer. Her body gave a small tremble, then went limp against the wall. Logan examined her more closely. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, minor lacerations. No visible broken bones, but she was on the edge of collapse. He pulled a canteen from his side pouch and helped her drink in small sips. For a long moment no one spoke, just the slow breathing of a woman who had survived something unthinkable. Sarah's voice, when it came again, was hoarse. He said no one would care, that no one ever came back for people like me. Logan didn't answer at first. He looked at Duke, still lying by her side like a silent sentinel, the same way Banner had once lain beside Marcus after the shelling. He swallowed hard. I almost believed that Logan said more to himself than her, but Duke didn't. Her eyes flickered toward him, unsure whether to trust or simply hope. "Why would he help me?" she asked. "He doesn't see you the way people do," Logan said. "He hears pain. He smells fear. He follows what's real." Duke gently licked her hand like a vow. Logan stood and scanned the basement. No cameras, no chains, just subtle cruelty, neglect, silence, disappearance. The air felt thicker the longer they stood in it. Sarah turned to him again, more alert now. "Emily?" She found Duke. Logan nodded. She trusted him before she trusted me. For a moment, something flickered across Sarah's face, something like awe or disbelief. Logan felt his chest tighten. This woman, abandoned, left to disappear, had trusted her daughter's life to a K9 she'd never met. And somehow it had worked. Sarah gave a faint, broken laugh. "I told her, if she ever got away, find Duke. He remembers. I showed him." "Showed him what?" She hesitated. "A flash drive. I had to hide it. I was being watched. I didn't want them to find it on me." "Where?" She turned her face toward Logan, her voice nearly a whisper. "Behind the supply shed, far corner, under the loose plank in the back wall. I showed Duke. He knows." Logan glanced at Duke, who looked back at him and gave the faintest chuff as if to confirm it. Just then the radio on Logan's belt crackled to life. Echo command to Sergeant Hayes. Report. He pressed the mic, found the missing civilian, alive but dehydrated and restrained. House 28. Basement, request immediate medevac. "Roger that. Medical team inbound." Sarah leaned into Duke, whispering as if to the dog alone. "You waited for me." Logan took off his outer shirt and draped it over her frail shoulders. "Help's coming," he said. "Just hold on." Above, the first sound of approaching sirens broke through the still air. In the distance, tires crunched gravel. The front gate creaked open. Time had returned to the world. Duke didn't move from Sarah's side. As medics entered the basement, Logan stepped back to let them work. He stayed quiet, only speaking when needed, eyes watching Sarah's slow but steady breathing. When they carried her out, Logan followed in silence. Outside in the blinding daylight, he paused and looked at Duke. The shepherd stood still at the basement door, ears forward, watching every movement of the stretcher. Logan knelt down and ran his hand along Duke's back. "You did it," he murmured. "You brought her home." Duke leaned into his touch for just a second, then sat down beside him, panting lightly in the heat. Claridge Base simmered beneath the afternoon sun. Asphalt shimmered, metal fences radiated heat, and even the wind felt tired. Logan stood beside the weathered supply shed behind House 28, the one Sarah had described in her hoarse voice just hours earlier. Duke sat silently next to him, ears alert, eyes locked on the rear wall. "Show me, buddy," Logan said softly. Without hesitation, Duke rose and padded to the far corner, sniffed twice, then scratched gently at a plank that appeared no different from the others. Logan knelt and ran his fingers along the seam. The board gave slightly. He pried it loose with a pocket tool. Behind it, tucked carefully into a crack in the concrete, was a dirt-smeared plastic bag. Inside was a USB drive. Logan turned it over in his hand, then looked at Duke. The shepherd tilted his head slightly, calm and knowing. Logan whispered, "You remembered." He pocketed the drive and glanced at the shed's corners. No cameras, no witnesses, just heat dust and secrets. Back at the command trailer, Logan sat alone in the dim glow of a desk lamp. The walls were lined with old maps, comms gear, and files too outdated to be useful. He plugged the USB into the secure terminal. A folder popped up. No encryption. Inside 3 audio files and 1 video. He clicked the first audio. A grainy voice came through Lucas Brandt. "She won't talk. Not yet. But if she does, we've got a problem." A second voice responded. Low, commanding, older. "Colonel Hale. Handle it, Brandt. Quietly. We can't afford another report on this." Logan froze. He played the second file. Different date, same voices. "She tried to contact a lawyer," Lucas said. "Her daughter saw too much. Then separate them. You have your orders." The third file was quieter, muffled. Then a voice from Sarah, frantic, desperate. "You can't keep us here. My daughter, she's a child. You're sick." A scuffle, a door slamming. Logan stared at the screen. His mouth was dry. Then he clicked the video. A grainy black and white feed from a hidden camera showed Sarah in what appeared to be an office, Colonel Hale's office. She placed something on the desk. Papers. Her face was determined, angry. "I won't be quiet. You think being decorated gives you immunity? You're wrong." Colonel Hale stood behind her, silent. Then the video cut. Logan pulled the drive out, staring at it like it burned in his hand. The implications were staggering. Not just an abuse of authority, but a cover-up, a network of silence. Orders that had cost Sarah her freedom nearly cost Emily her life. A knock on the trailer door startled him. It opened without waiting. Sergeant Monroe stepped inside. A tall, dark-skinned man in his late 30s, Monroe was known for his sharp instincts and no-nonsense approach. He wore his uniform, crisp sleeves, rolled hands always near his belt, just in case. "You're not on duty," Hayes Monroe said. "What are you doing with unauthorized comms access?" Logan pocketed the USB before turning. Following up on a lead, victim statement from Sarah Lennox. She mentioned a hidden drive. "I found it." Monroe narrowed his eyes. "And you didn't report it immediately. I wanted to verify its content first. And now that I have Logan walk to the door, brushing past Monroe, you'll want to see this." Monroe followed him into the main operations tent. Minutes later, the files played again, this time in front of Monroe and a communications officer. The room was silent except for the chilling voices. When it ended, Monroe looked at Logan, something unreadable behind his eyes. "This goes higher than we thought." Logan nodded. "And we can't bury it." Outside, Duke sat patiently beneath a canopy, his fur darkened by sweat and sun. Logan stepped out and knelt beside him. "For all your silence," Logan said, rubbing the dog's ear, "you just spoke louder than any of us." Duke leaned into his touch. For the first time, Logan didn't just see a trained K9. He saw a survivor, a partner, a creature who remembered, who acted, who refused to forget. The courtroom was nothing more than a repurposed meeting hall inside Clayridge Base, its walls covered in beige panels. The flag of the United States hung limp in the stagnant air, and the hum of ceiling fans competed with the tension in the room. Rows of soldiers and civilians lined the benches. Some were here out of curiosity, others out of duty, but all of them sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Logan stood at the back of the room, his posture rigid but eyes restless. He wore a clean-pressed uniform, though his sleeves were rolled just above the elbows, revealing tan lines and old scars. At his feet sat Duke head-high ears, flicking at the soft shuffle of boots and shifting chairs. The German Shepherd's sable coat shimmered under the fluorescence, and his expression remained steady, alert, calm, yet poised like a soldier awaiting orders. At the front, a military tribunal presided over the hearing. Behind the long table sat 3 officers, a stern-faced female major, a balding lieutenant colonel, and a civilian legal advisor who adjusted his glasses every few seconds. The room quieted when Colonel Hale entered, shoulders squared but jaw tight. Behind him, Lucas Brandt followed in cuffs, the tan of his jumpsuit stark against his usual smug demeanor. Now his eyes darted unmoored. Sarah Lennox took the witness stand first. She wore a pale blouse and dark jeans, borrowed clothing from the hospital. Her face was drawn but steady, her dark hair tied back to reveal sunken cheeks and healing bruises. She looked smaller than she had in the basement, but stronger somehow, like someone who had already passed through the storm and no longer feared the thunder. "I was held without explanation." She said, her voice firm, despite a slight rasp. Lucas Brandt, under direct or indirect orders, kept me restrained in his home's basement for 11 days. My daughter was separated from me. I feared she was dead. Her eyes didn't leave Lucas. He blinked, mouth tightening, but said nothing. The major leaned forward. "Do you have evidence?" Mrs. Lennox Sarah looked to the back of the room. "Yes. And my daughter Emily can speak to what she witnessed." Logan felt a tug at his sleeve. Emily stood beside him, clutching a drawing in her left hand and Duke's leash in her right. She had insisted on walking in by herself, even though her shoes were mismatched and her dress wrinkled from napping on the bench. Her long brown hair was tied into two messy braids, and her face, though thin, had color again. When she walked forward, the room held its breath. She stepped onto the platform with a quiet dignity that stunned the adults. She handed the drawing to the tribunal. It was a child's sketch, bright colors, uneven lines, but it spoke volumes. In it, Duke stood between Emily and Logan, surrounded by light. Above them in big letters were the words, "They found me." Emily looked at the judges. "I don't remember everything, but Mommy said if I got away I had to find Duke. He was my best friend. He remembered me." "And what happened when you did?" the legal advisor asked gently. "I followed him. He found Logan. And then Logan didn't yell or look scared like the others. He listened." She paused. "Then they came and found my mommy." There was silence in the room. Logan stepped forward and submitted the USB. It had already been authenticated. The tribunal played the recordings. The voices of Lucas and Colonel Hale filled the room, muffled, low, unmistakable. "Handle it, Brandt." Quietly, she tried to contact a lawyer, separate them. Each line drew visible reactions, tight jaws, widened eyes, clenched fists. When the final clip ended, no one spoke, not even the judges. Then Duke barked, once, loud, unmistakable. It echoed off the walls. The moment cracked the silence like a gavel. Some gasped, others chuckled nervously. But Logan stood still, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The major leaned forward. "Sergeant Brandt, do you wish to respond?" Lucas looked around at the room, at the faces at Duke, and knew it was over. He lowered his eyes. "No, no." The tribunal recessed. Moments later, the verdict was clear: Lucas Brandt dishonorably discharged and remanded for federal charges. Colonel Hale suspended pending full investigation. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon. Logan sat on the low stone ledge outside the courtroom, arms resting on his knees. Duke sat beside him, tail flicking lazily. Emily approached and plopped down between them, swinging her legs. "You know what I drew today?" she asked, eyes bright. "I saw it," Logan said with a smile. "You drew me too short." She giggled, but Duke was perfect. He ruffled her braid. "Can't argue with that." She handed him another drawing, this one not meant for court. In it, Duke wore a cape. Logan held a flashlight, and Emily had a heart above her head. On the corner in childlike scrawl were the words, "My heroes." Logan looked at it for a long moment. "I'm not used to being drawn with capes," he said. "You don't need one," she replied. "You bring light anyway." For the first time in years, Logan laughed, a real unforced laugh that pulled from somewhere deep. Duke looked up, wagged his tail once, and rested his head on Logan's boot. The sun cast its glow gently now, as if it too had grown tired of burning. The once scorching heat of Clayridge seemed to have given way to something lighter, something quieter. In the modest community recreation center near the base, an old red brick building with a fading mural of children and flags, Logan stood beside Sarah and Emily as volunteers bustled about, preparing for the afternoon's gathering. It had been 2 weeks since the tribunal. The base had gone through visible changes, some officers reassigned, others suspended, and a new wave of questions began about how far silence could stretch before it broke something vital. But inside Logan, a more personal change had taken root. For the first time in years, his mornings didn't begin with dread. And that morning, for the first time, he'd stood in front of a mirror and didn't see only what had been lost. Duke trotted ahead of him, now wearing a new vest, navy blue with a white patch stitched carefully on the side, K9 Companion. Emotional support. His gait was strong, his eyes clear, and his tail wagged gently when children approached. Though once trained for tactical operations, the German Shepherd seemed born again this time as something gentler. In the corner of the room, Sarah was helping set up a folding table with juice boxes and coloring books. She wore a simple white cotton dress that brushed just below her knees. Her dark hair now clean and combed into a low bun, framed a face still bearing faint traces of old bruises, but her posture had changed. She stood taller, her voice steady. There was something almost regal in the way she moved now, like someone who had survived drowning and was no longer afraid of deep water. Emily, on the other hand, darted around the room like sunlight. She wore denim overalls over a pink shirt and carried a plastic craft box filled with string glue and foam shapes. On her wrist was a bracelet she had made for Duke, tiny blue and yellow beads with a tag that said, "Hero." She stopped in front of Logan and tilted her head. "Close your eyes," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Why? Because it's a surprise." With a resigned chuckle, Logan closed his eyes. He felt small fingers brush his shirt. Then something cool pressed gently against his chest. "Okay." Open, pinned to his pocket flap, was a small handcrafted badge. It was cut from felt with crooked stitches and a tiny dog silhouette in the center. Above it were words in shaky lettering, "For the one who never left anyone behind." He looked down at her, a lump rising in his throat. Emily beamed. "Now you're official." He bent down, resting his hands on her shoulders. "I'll wear it with honor, Miss Commander." From nearby, Sarah watched, arms crossed, smiling faintly. "She's been working on that every night since the hearing," she said softly. "Said it had to be perfect." "She got it more than perfect," Logan murmured, eyes still on the badge. The event was part of a new initiative pairing trained K-9s with children who had suffered abuse or trauma. It was something Sarah had suggested, and Logan, for reasons he didn't fully understand at the time, had signed up for immediately. He would serve not as a soldier or a guard, but as a trainer, a listener, a bridge. Duke would serve beside him, not chasing threats, but offering comfort. Healing wasn't the mission, it was the method. As children began arriving, some shy, some too loud, Duke moved among them like a wise old sentinel. One little boy with a scar down his temple reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Duke's fur. The dog leaned forward and licked his hand. The boy smiled. Logan stood nearby, watching quietly. Then someone approached a woman in her late 40s, short, with tight gray curls and glasses slipping down her nose. She wore a worn blazer and had a clipboard in hand. "You're Logan Hayes?" she asked. He nodded. "Name's Judith. I run the K-9 therapy outreach for the state. Heard about you and your partner." She glanced down at Duke, then offered a warm nod. "I just want to say it's rare to see a combat dog transition this well, and rarer still to see his handler follow him through." Logan rubbed the back of his neck. "Wasn't exactly a straight line." She laughed. "It never is. But I think you're exactly what this program needs." As Judith walked off, Logan looked back at Sarah and Emily. The two were coloring together, Sarah helping Emily outline a sun that seemed to smile too big. It reminded him of the ones he used to draw as a kid before the war, before the silence. He walked outside just for a breath of air. The late summer wind rustled through the nearby trees, no longer heavy with heat. Instead, it carried a strange softness like the air itself had exhaled. Duke followed and sat at his side, watching the horizon. "I ever tell you about my first dog?" Logan asked, glancing down. Duke looked up, a tail thumping once. "Her name was Daisy. She was smaller than you. Louder, too." He smiled. But she had the same eyes. Like she knew when things weren't okay. Like she could see past what I said. Duke rested his head on Logan's knee. Logan scratched behind his ears. "You ever think we didn't find Emily?" he asked quietly. "That maybe she found us?" Inside laughter broke out. The kind that didn't carry weight, didn't come with conditions. Just laughter. And for once it didn't feel out of place. Logan stood, brushed the dust off his pants, and looked down at Duke. "Come on, partner. We've got kids to train. And maybe a few more badges to earn." In a world that often forgets the quiet ones, the children too afraid to speak, the soldiers too broken to ask for help, and the dogs left behind after the battle is over, this story reminds us of something deeper. That sometimes miracles don't come with lightning or trumpets. Sometimes they arrive on four legs with soft eyes and a louder bark than any courtroom could echo. God doesn't always speak through burning bushes. Sometimes he whispers through the loyalty of a dog. Sometimes he places a child in your path, not for you to save, but to save you. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, remember this. No one is forgotten in his eyes. Not Emily, not Sarah, not Logan, not Duke, and not you. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs light today. Comment Amen if you believe that even the smallest among us are part of God's greatest plans. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of hope healing and the quiet grace that walks beside us, even when we don't notice. May God bless you and everyone you love.